There exists a peculiar moment in human interaction when the dynamic shifts. It is subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like the slight change in air pressure before a storm. Someone establishes a boundary, and suddenly, the entire relationship transforms. The person on the other side of that boundary does not simply accept it. They do not nod and move forward with their lives. Instead, something darker awakens within them. A resentment. A quiet fury. And this fury is not born from the boundary itself, but from what the boundary represents, the loss of control. For decades, psychological research has shown us that human beings are fundamentally driven by the need for control. Not control over our external circumstances alone, but control over others. We live in a world where influence is currency, where the ability to shape another person's behavior, emotions, and decisions is a form of power that runs deeper than money or status. When someone sets a boundary with you, they are not simply saying no. They are declaring independence. They are stating, with absolute clarity, that you no longer possess dominion over their choices. And this declaration triggers something primal within the human psyche. Consider the nature of relationships as they form. In the beginning, there is a dance. Both parties are testing the edges of acceptability, probing to discover how far they can push, how much they can take, how much influence they can exert. This is not necessarily malicious. It is the default human algorithm. We are all seeking to optimize our position within the social hierarchy. We are all, at some level, trying to gain advantage. But when someone draws a line and says, "This far, and no further," they are fundamentally disrupting this natural order. They are refusing to participate in the competition for dominance. The hatred of boundaries is, at its core, a hatred of powerlessness. When you establish a boundary, you are not rejecting the person. You are rejecting their attempts to control you. And the person who has grown accustomed to that control, who has built their sense of self-worth on the ability to influence you, cannot accept this loss. Their ego fractures. Their sense of reality becomes distorted. They begin to see you not as you truly are, but as a threat to their identity. This is where the manipulation begins. The person who hates your boundary will employ a sophisticated arsenal of psychological tactics designed to make you question the boundary itself. They will appeal to your guilt. They will remind you of past favors, of moments of vulnerability they shared with you, of the good times before you became so cold and distant. They will reframe your boundary as selfishness. They will position themselves as the victim. They will tell you that if you truly cared about them, you would let them back in. You would soften. You would return to the dynamic where they held power. But the shift does not stop with manipulation through guilt. It moves deeper, much deeper. It enters the realm of what psychologists call narcissistic injury, a wound to the ego that is far more painful than any physical wound could ever be. When a narcissist or someone with narcissistic traits encounters a boundary they cannot breach, they experience what feels to them like annihilation. Their carefully constructed sense of superiority, their false self, begins to crumble. And in that moment of crisis, they do not turn inward. They do not engage in self-reflection. Instead, they lash outward with fury. The person who hates your boundary will begin to paint you as the villain in their narrative. They will tell others that you are cruel, ungrateful, selfish, and damaged. They will rewrite history. They will take moments of genuine connection and twist them into evidence of your betrayal. They will gather allies, people who they have also influenced, people who depend on their version of events, and they will orchestrate a campaign to prove that you are wrong. That your boundary is not an act of self-preservation, but an act of aggression against them. This is the dark truth about power dynamics that most people never understand. When you set a boundary with someone who has derived their sense of power from your compliance, you are not simply saying no to a single request. You are declaring war on their identity. You are threatening the very foundation of how they see themselves. And a person under threat, a person whose ego has been wounded, will respond with violence. Not necessarily physical violence, though that is certainly possible, but emotional violence, psychological violence, the kind of violence that leaves no marks but scars the soul far more deeply than any blade could. The hatred of boundaries is also rooted in something far more ancient than narcissism. It is rooted in the fear of abandonment. Throughout human history, being cast out from the group meant death. In the ancestral environment, being separated from the tribe was a death sentence. That fear is still encoded in our biology, in our nervous system. When someone establishes a boundary, on some primitive level, the other person interprets it as the beginning of exile. They are being pushed out. They are being rejected. And this triggers an ancient primal panic. This panic manifests in different ways depending on the person's psychological profile. Some will become aggressive, trying to reassert dominance through intimidation or control. Some will become submissive, adopting a victim persona in hopes of triggering your compassion and forcing you to lower your boundary. Some will become obsessive, unable to think of anything else but how to breach your wall and restore the dynamic they once enjoyed. And some will disappear entirely, moving on to find someone else whose boundaries are weaker, whose capacity to resist has not yet been developed. But here is the profound psychological truth that separates those who maintain their boundaries from those who do not. The hatred you receive is not actually about you. It is not about anything you have done or failed to do. It is about the other person's inability to control themselves, their emotions, and their need for power. When someone hates your boundaries, they are revealing something essential about themselves. They are showing you that their relationship with you was never based on genuine connection, mutual respect, or authentic care. It was based on utility. It was based on your willingness to serve a role in their narrative, to feed their ego, to validate their sense of superiority. The most powerful people in the world understand this intuitively. They do not apologize for their boundaries. They do not explain them endlessly. They do not attempt to make the other person feel better about the limitation. They simply hold the line. And when the other person reacts with hatred, with manipulation, with character assassination, they respond with absolute indifference. This indifference is not coldness or cruelty. It is clarity. It is the recognition that the other person's emotional response to their boundary is not their responsibility to manage. This brings us to the second layer of why boundaries are so deeply hated. They represent a transfer of power. Before the boundary, the person who hates you held the power to influence your choices, to demand your time, to expect your emotional labor. After the boundary, that power is transferred to you. You now possess the power to say no. You now possess the power to allocate your resources as you see fit. You now possess the power to decide who deserves access to your energy, your attention, your care. And the person who has lost this power will spend tremendous psychological energy trying to convince you and themselves that this transfer was unjust, that they somehow deserve to keep that power, that your assertion of autonomy is an act of betrayal. The hatred of boundaries is also deeply connected to the concept of entitlement. In many relationships, especially those that have existed for a long time, an expectation develops. The other person comes to believe that they are entitled to certain things from you: your time, your energy, your emotional availability, your loyalty. These expectations often develop without explicit negotiation. They simply accumulate through repeated patterns of behavior. You accommodate them. You meet their needs. You prioritize their comfort. And eventually, they come to view this accommodation as your obligation, not your choice. When you establish a boundary, you are essentially saying that these entitlements end now. You are renegotiating the terms of the relationship. And the person who has benefited from these entitlements will experience this renegotiation as a form of theft. They will feel as though you are taking something that was rightfully theirs. They will not see themselves as someone who has been taking without permission. They will see themselves as someone who is being deprived of what they deserve. This is the distortion that entitlement creates in the human mind. But the most critical insight, the understanding that separates the truly powerful from the perpetually vulnerable, is this: the hatred of your boundaries reveals not your weakness, but the other person's weakness. A truly secure, truly confident person may be disappointed by a boundary, but they will not hate you for it. They may feel sadness. They may feel loss, but they will not transform that sadness into a campaign against you. Only someone whose sense of self is fundamentally fragile, whose identity is built on their ability to control others, will respond to your boundary with genuine hatred. And so we arrive at the ultimate paradox. The very act of setting a boundary, the very act of saying no, the very act of reclaiming your power and your autonomy, simultaneously reveals to you the true nature of every person in your life. It becomes a filter. Those who respect your boundary, who may not like it but who accept it, those are the people worth keeping close. Those who rage against your boundary, who try to manipulate you back into compliance, who paint you as the villain for daring to protect yourself, those are the people who were never truly connected to you. They were connected to what you could provide. They were connected to the utility you represented. And your boundary has simply made that truth undeniable. The hatred of boundaries is in essence the hatred of your freedom. And when you understand this, when you truly internalize it, you become immune to the manipulation, the guilt, the character assassination that follows. You realize that their anger is not a signal that you have done something wrong. It is a signal that you have done something right. You have reclaimed your power. You have said no to their control. You have chosen yourself over their comfort, and that, perhaps more than anything else in this world, is what they truly cannot forgive.